I got started in writing over a decade ago. I actually started on the fiction side of writing when I first got started. I graduated with a degree in marketing from Ball State, and then a master's in philanthropic studies from Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. And I got IU and Ball State in here. I feel pretty well covered. And during all that, I never really thought of myself as a writer. I really didn't. But as I kind of got more into, the fiction side and writing from there, I realized, hey, it's kind of cool what you can do, the power of the written word, right? And how you do that stuff. And I started, as my career developed, finding more of those opportunities to bring writing to the work I was doing. So places at like TechPoint and then at Blast Media, where I helped develop and found their content team, writing became an ever more critical piece of what I was doing. And what I realized, though, as I started working with folks, was how scary writing was for so many people. Like just the thought of even sitting down and writing something to like starting the first sentence is just like sheer terror. I remember this. We did a survey a couple of years ago with some of these PR professionals, and I asked them, like, what are the emotions you feel when you are like given a task to write? The top emotion by far is fear. And I'm like, we got to fix this. This isn't right? Writing should be fun, or at least like shouldn't be terrifying you. So I started my consulting firm to help folks really get past the fear of writing, right? And to start thinking of writing as this vehicle that helps us tell the stories of our lives and our work better. So that's me. I could have given you kind of the boring, like, whatever, here's all the accolades and stuff, but like that's not interesting, right? That's not a story. And really that's what underpins what we're going to talk about today, is how we find the pieces of ourselves and share them better with other people. I think about how important, how much story is even wired into our brains, right? From time immemorial, for thousands and thousands of years. I point to a study at Princeton University where they ran functional MRIs. So they scanned the brains of people. We had one that was a storyteller and one was a listener. And as they scanned their brains, you could watch the same systems in their brains light up. So specifically the rational frontal cortex right here with the emotional limbic region back in the midbrain. And they would align based on where they were in the story. The fact they were telling a story together showed that they were synchronizing their emotions and their logic. And it created this, what they called a social glue, both cognitively and emotionally. So stories and the way that we share them and how we talk to each other are how we connect on a very personal human level, right? I like to think that story gives life flavor, right? That's where you have all the stuff that happens to you, and it's kind of mundane sometimes. It's just doing his thing. But the way that we shape a narrative around story, right, and how we give our lives that narrative is what makes it interesting. It's how we derive meaning from the chaos of life, right? It's how we share lessons together in a way that we understand in a common language. And it's how we move, sway, and convince people of things. It's how we work in philanthropy, right, when we want to convince someone of an idea and a dream we want to accomplish. It's what we do in our businesses every day when we got to convince people to, sell things, right? We want to convince people to buy something, but it's also to understand why we're in business, right? And what we're trying to accomplish, and how by working with us, you can do that together, right? That's relational selling, right, in a nutshell, but that's what we're trying to do, right? Is create that kind of social glue, that connection between these emotional and rational parts of our brain. And so storyteller and listener can think together as one. I think that's really cool, right? That's the power of all this stuff. And it's fascinating because when you see this happen in the business world, all of this like falls apart. It's wild. I think folks, and we could probably spend a whole nother session on this too, but we've been taught, and I think conditioned for a very long time, to think of business as separate from personal, right? And I was listening to the stories around you of what you shared with each other, right? You had some of that personal, professional element there, we work at BoldThink, or we do this X, Y, and Z. Then you've also got being karate instructors, and the lives that you lead outside of work, right? I even think even 10 years ago, that would have been like, no, here's my title, here's the business I work at, here's my first line of my resume, right? And that's it. It's been really exciting to see, I think, the tide shift in the direction of bringing more of ourselves to our work. But we still struggle with that, both on the personal and the brand level, too. We, again, think of a brand as a business in its own right. It has its own story to tell, but we're so almost afraid of telling that story that fear kicks back in, right? We don't really know where to begin. And those are the folks I get to work with every day, of helping them find this story, right? And find that passion and bring it to the forefront of who they work with. So if you think about why we're bothering with today, this is what we want to cover, right? And that's where we have to start, is understanding what's in a story. There's a more interactive session for you. When I say the word story, what do you think of?
Past. Background. Example.
Background. Example, shout them out. You're good.
Books.
Books.
Beginning, middle, and end.
There you go. Beginning. My hand's going to get progressively worse as we go, so.
The point.
What's that?
The point.
The point? I like that, the point.
Or the moral of the story.
Moral.
Pick up the person's perspective.
Perspective, okay. You guys picking like the longest words too. Come on, all right. The shorter words.
A group of words that mean more than just the sum of the words themselves.
Ooh, I'm gonna paraphrase that, but I like that. I like that. I like that. That's some. Okay.
Nice.
There's a math coming in there. Yeah, that's like high school math. It's fine. I like that. So yeah, me too. It's an ugly looking stigma. It looks terrible.
So before you go to that, can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
So when you ask somebody what you want to know about you,
mm-hmm.
do you feel like the people tell, I want you to know about me? Like most of them talk about business. I was the only one that didn't. And then she even told me, she's like, I don't think that's what he wants to know. He wants to know like what you do, And I was like, but I think that's not what I want people to know about me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to come in and say, I work with this. This is this is what I do. And then I start saying, okay, I'm energetic, I'm happy, I am, it's just like, I don't think that's what I want to do. So what I noticed is, do you think if people creates like a wall to not let other people know about them?
Sure.
And then this is what I do, that's my work. And it's like, oh no, that's not what I asked. Because who are you?
Mm-hmm.
Like, now,
Mm-hmm.
what do you do? So that was a tricky question. That
It
you
is.
did.
It is.
It was a different way to look at it.
That's why we ask it that
Or
way.
is it the absence of what you don't say part of your story?
Right.
Mhm.
Because I'll say Bob told me he's from Indiana, he's married to his father. I didn't get any of those details. And so maybe that's part of the story.
Exactly.
And everybody's story is different.
Yes. And how we tell that story to others is different too. And you're realizing through that question the personal choices and the decisions we make and how we portray ourselves amongst a group of potential strangers or people we even know, right? You would answer that question perhaps very differently in a formal boardroom versus having friends at your house, right? If I ask you this question in a couple hours, we go down to the bar and hang out for a bit, right? And ask this question later, am I going to get a different answer, right? And as you grow and learn and develop with people, think about coworkers and other folks in your life, does that story change over time, right? Do we start off with the comfort of, hey, here's what's publicly portrayed in my LinkedIn profile, right? Here's what everyone can see. It's what I want them to see. And as we learn over time, we open ourselves up. Yes. This is where if you hear words like authentic or vulnerable, like all this is starting to come up, like be more authentic in your brand story. You're like, I don't know what that means. This is what this is, right? Is the level of comfort you have in sharing these kinds of details. And we'll get to a couple of those in a minute, but it's a level, and this is what you, as brand managers, as communicators, as storytellers, and as aspiring communicators, these are decisions you have to make, right? And sometimes they're not always your decision to make either. If you've got a team of folks around you, or you have a boss, you have other people telling you, we don't want to sound that way, right? As you add people in, the number of challenges increases exponentially, right? It's not linear. If you've ever had to have someone review a piece of writing, more than like 2 people, I think my record's like 13. Legal, finance, executive, comms teams. And by the end of it, you end up with the blandest part possible. We've taken out the story because story carries risk inherently. Because when you're vulnerable and open yourself up, you open yourself up to something. Yes, offense, or you could say something you don't mean to, right? When you start creating the sanitized version, it is open to interpretation, right? It is a qualitative aspect that is not so easily quantitatively measured, which has baffled marketers for hundreds of years. And still remains an unsolved problem. Whoever figures it out is going to be a trillionaire, so y'all should get on that. But that's the beauty and the challenge of storytelling in business, right, is that balance between the two. You highlight a very good point. Thank you for that. Any other questions before I hop in more? We good? Okay, cool. So what's in the story? I love all these things. Some of the group of words, it's greater. I'll have to write the whole thing later. But when you think about story, there's all kinds of ways you can phrase it. If you've ever heard of the monomyth or the hero's journey, perhaps, which looks a little bit like, I'm not going to draw it, there's 17 steps to it, but you got your hero up here and they go into the land of surreal, of some change that's happening. They get a guide down here to help them. Again, welcome my drawing skills. There's the death and rebirth, so there's a low point and a high point. They come back changed and transformed, right, and come back to their world a better person therein. So everything from the Epic of Gilgamesh to Star Wars does this. This is what they all do, is the hero's journey. So this has been around since, this is Joseph Campbell back in the 60s. So about 60 years of research has gone into the monomyth. You may have also heard of Freytag's pyramid. So that might be high school English all over again, but essentially, and I have great looking graphs on a PowerPoint for you. So essentially you've got, it looks very much like the 3-act structure. So setup, rising action, climax, there's some really exciting piece. There's the fall off. Again, you come over here, there's some kind of resolution, and the denouement goes out like that. It's a really lopsided looking pyramid, but it's a couple of different academic models here to describe what goes in the story. So these come from researching thousands of stories over thousands of years.
So can you like explain that as if you're explaining it to an engineer?
Yep, that's exactly what we're going to. Yes. So, and this is why I want to mention these are confusing as hell. Like, that's hard, right? And when in life are you ever going to experience this, right? At least write it out that way in an academic model. Businesses are trying to get better about it. So if you've ever seen the IDA model, so was it attention, interest, desire, action. So again, terrible writing. So again, grab someone's attention, hook them, make them more interested, make them want something, and then give them the call to action to go do it, right? So it's taking a little bit of this and starting to boil it down. And you see other models, there's 100 of them, problem, agitation, solution, you got pass out there. But essentially they all do exactly the same thing. I'm getting to your point here of the 3 real elements of all of this, right? So you've got all these models, that's great. What's in a story, right? What's in a story? And that's going to be 3 things here. Character, conflict, resolution. All those models, all those pieces are these 3 things. Character, conflict, and resolution. Now, what are all these? So character is someone or something you can empathize with. And there's something as well, right? If you think about any kind of advertising, it's not always about the person, it's within the thing, right? So someone or something you can empathize with, that's the character. The conflict is the tension between a current state and a desired future state. Where you are now and where you want to be. That inherently creates conflict. There's a battle going on there. And the character is subjected to that conflict. Out of all that conflict, though, comes a resolution, a solution that takes you to some level of satisfaction with that desired future state. Our character goes through conflict and emerges with a resolution. These 3 pieces are in any story you look at anywhere. Whenever I do this one with a video, I like looking at Super Bowl commercials. So if you look at Super Bowl commercials, they have 30 seconds and are spending $10 million to try to convince you of something. All of them do this, right? In some form or fashion, sometimes funny, sometimes serious, sometimes makes you want to cry. You've got emotions all throughout here, right? But it's all these 3 things. There's a character who needs to accomplish something, something is in the way, and they resolve it. And that's been true for 40, 50 years of Super Bowl commercials. I love it, it's great.
Procter & Gamble use that a lot. Like you see all the Procter & Gamble commercials, like the mom's teaching the kids how to skate, and then the kids getting hurt, and then the kids winning a championship.
Exactly, yes. They show you the character, right, and the challenge of making that happen, and the win, yes. So these are the three pieces, and the way you intermix these, and when you learn how to master the intermix of these three things, that makes a fantastic storyteller, right? It's how all these three things work together. Where they go wrong for businesses, where things usually go off the rails. Each of these has a challenge that many businesses face. With character, they make it about themselves. You are not the character, you're the guide. Your character is your end user, your beneficiary, your consumer, right? You are not the character.
The avatar.
Exactly, yes. You are the guide to help me understand all of this, right? But you are not the one here. If you've ever read any kind of especially this happens in tech all the time. If you've ever read the About Us page, and they list all the product's features and benefits and how great it is and how we started this to go and do all this stuff, I don't care. I don't care, right? They made the story about themselves, right? And there are some caveats with this too. I started with About Me story as a piece of it, right? But it's about, again, that connection of forming that connection between storyteller and listener. And if you get stuck in here, making all about me instead of about we, right, you're going to lose your audience's attention. You won't be able to get them interested and invested and empathize with you as a business. Conflict. This one is probably the most egregious one I see because it's the most uncomfortable to have to address conflict. This is when, if you ever want to show vulnerability as a brand, everyone gets terrified, right? We want to talk about how great we are as a company all the time, right? We're always so successful. The graph is always going up and to the right, right? But nobody ever believes that. They know it's crap. They know you're lying to them. But businesses still feel like if they show the downs, it will take away from the ups, right? If they show the struggle, it'll take away from the success they think they're portraying. You lose people here the most out of all of this. Because when they just see how great everything is all the time, they don't believe you. You're not building trust, right? All of this is building trust with your audience. Make them empathize and feel something with you. If you leave out the conflict, you're falling down on your ice skates, right? If you leave this piece out, you lose your audience's attention. They don't believe you. They don't understand where they're going. They don't understand that trust piece. They're out. They're done. You get to the resolution piece, what happens a lot of the times is, and this is where a good call to action is really important, because you get to here, you've given me someone to care about, right? You've helped me see myself in the Super Bowl commercial or in the product page, right? I understand the conflict we've gone through to get there and how we've come out better on the other side. They drop the ball here with a resolution piece. They go, okay, that's it. If you ever wonder why cliffhangers are so good in movies, right? It's because they leave this piece out, right? There's no resolution. Inception drives people nuts because that top keeps spinning. You don't know what happens, right? That's probably too old a reference. I don't know, but it's that leaving out the resolution of giving me an ending, right? It can be really tempting to bring me back in for the sequel, but buyers don't have time to go find a resolution elsewhere. I think one of the newest trends that drives me nuts when it comes to advertising right now is the go to our website to go see the rest of this commercial. I'm like, what are you doing? You've paid for my attention now. You have me here. You're trying to get me into this. They're trying this multimedia experience. But if they haven't done enough of this stuff up here, they leave this for the heavy lifting. They go, we'll come to the website and we'll show you how it ends. But if I don't care in the first place, then why am I going here, right? It means they did not build up enough tension in here to get me to see that desired future state, right? And then they fumble the bag right here in resolution. So those are all terrible things here, but any questions on any of that? I know that's a lot to cover, but I think the big piece to remember in what's in the story is character conflict resolution and how all of these things lead to better outcomes for your end user, your beneficiary.
I like the conflict when reminds me of a commercial for medication.
Take me through that.
You can have diarrhea. You can have this, and that. But my medicine is going to help you with that.
So you might die.
Well, yeah. But I told you my conflict, but I also told you that I can't believe the result for that specific thing you're feeling.
Yes,
right.
Exactly.
So it's not all like my medicine is going to cure you. You're never going to feel anything else, and you're going to be the happiest person in the world. But I wouldn't believe in that medication.
Yeah, I would say I'm in the middle of writing a book.
Yes.
And I would say that I'm a business person. I'm a finance major, math person.
Mm-hmm.
So in my book, I started with a story.
Yes.
And I said, here's a business. I described the situation. I introduced them who the CEO of the company is. I described all the situation. And then I talked about the problem that they're facing. And then I introduced a solution on how you solve these problems. And so, it's kind of intuitive to do that. But, I think that the challenge is, how do you, in a subject that's dry,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Without sounding, like I said, esoteric,
Right.
That where the only people who understand what I'm talking about are people who understand what I'm talking about, not the people that I want to understand.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the part that I struggle with. And that
A disconnect in the audience you want to
Yes.
reach. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Because otherwise I'll get 1,000 people who are like, you are so right. But that's not the people I'm trying to reach. I'm trying to reach the people who don't know what I'm talking about.
I think Bob's got some thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I think I know the answer to this, but you want to do it in the order that you've got on your chart there. Character first, then the conflict, then the resolution, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is order of operations. Yeah. Yeah. You need 1, 2, and 3. This is, someone mentioned the 3-act structure earlier. This is the 3-act structure. There's a reason it works so well, right? Is you have a setup of that character and the challenge they're going to face. We walk us through that conflict in real time and then you see it's resolution, denouement, and the falling off, all that. But essentially, this is that 3-act structure you see in any 90-minute movie. This is it. So to your point about the book, then, I wonder, you mentioned starting with a story at the beginning. Tell me that story real quickly.
So, like, let's say I have a business owner of a company that wants to grow his business to be a $1 billion business. And he goes into a staff meeting and he's frustrated because he leaves the staff meeting and everybody's pointing fingers at everybody else. He wants to grow the business to be 1 billion. He has no idea if he's even on the trajectory to hit 1 billion.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's infighting. And so that's the story, essentially. And so I described that whole scenario of how they feel, right? And what he's trying to do, what he wants to accomplish, what he's experiencing, what it's feeling like. And then I go into that, the conflict is he needs to grow this business.
Mm-hmm.
So then the question is, and then I go in there. And then, and I go into, but, I'll say that, and I think I've been doing a really good job of following the character conflict and resolution.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge is this fine line between sounding academic and sounding real.
Mm.
And I get some people who will say, and this is where it depends on who you talk to. They like the textbooky version, or they like the plain speak. So how do you navigate reaching an audience in these 3 elements that's not too academic, but not too informal?
So your current audience that you do want to write for wants that balance? They want both?
Well, it's both. Because
they want both?
Got some audience that are very academic, and you got some.
She has 2 audiences.
Yeah,
that's what it's sounding like a bit.
And then you have a part of the audience that just wants to speak.
Take me through. Go ahead.
Yesterday, I listened to a judge from the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals who's recently written a book about Clarence Thomas from the United States Supreme Court. Okay. And what this guy did was he gave his draft to his family, his wife and his kids, and they all said, "What the hell, man? What does this mean? What does this mean?" So it's a good way to get somebody else's perspective on what you're doing, is to give it somebody that may not be in your field.
Not familiar with it.
Now this story, I feel like if I was reading a book, if I read the story, I would understand. If I flip the page to something else that you're going to talk about, the part of step to get to that inside that story, I probably wouldn't get it. You know what I'm saying? But when you tell the story, you're like, oh, as a business owner, I can see it, the problem there. Then you go to the other side more academic.
Yeah, that's my
like
concern. So my concern is that I'm doing a pretty good job with the character and the conflict,
Mhm.
and then with the resolution, I'm afraid I'm getting too technical. You know what I mean?
I do, and I think your definition of academic versus real, I think it's going to be getting some clarity on that for yourself and your audiences. So when you say plain speak, how plain are we talking, right? Like, is it a matter of, are you thinking of, I need shorter words, or are you missing some piece of here where it's like, I'm not connecting with somebody because I'm writing at a 14th grade level? Like,
or when I talk about the character and I talk about the conflict, it's interesting because people resonate it, and then when I get to the resolution, I lose people because the resolution doesn't resonate. Because and so how do you? That's the part that I struggle with, and I've given it. I'm like 50 pages into my book, and so I've given it to people. What do you think? And that's the comment. Well, you do a really good job on not using these words, character, conflict. But then you go into this, which sounds textbooky-ish, is the comment. And so how do you find
50 pages? Is that your ideal length, or do you have more to write?
No. I'm only like halfway through chapter 2.
Okay.
So
maybe you haven't gotten a resolution yet, or are you talking in the initial story?
There's different categories of conflict.
Okay.
So chapter 2, I'm only I'm not there's a lot of other problems.
I think you got to write more of the book first. I think that's where it starts, because I hear what you're saying, but that resolution might change as you get more of this done too. So I wouldn't say worry. This is the big piece of advice I have. Don't worry so much about the first beginning of it. Just get the first draft done. Since you've got more to write, get cooking on the rest of it, because this is going to change the more you go back and redraft. You're going to write that thing like 100 times. Trust me, it happens to everybody.
I've already.
I think they're important questions to be thinking all the time, though. I think having each chapter act as its own scene, you see this a lot in fiction writing too, where this happens on a miniature level, right? Like it's the hobbits leaving the Shire kind of thing, right?
Well,
like this happens every time.
I got some feedback early on that people are generally linear learners, and so the story that I started with, the CEO of a company that's going to the staff meeting and he's frustrated, and you carry that story. So each chapter will carry that story with the different problems that arise. So it's stringing along, but I go from, and I totally see this. I go from, I'm really good at the story part, and then I get into the resolution part, and I sound like a textbook right out of freaking college. That nobody wants to listen to.
So is this book for managers? How they can manage their employees?
Yeah.
So your main target is the managers, basically. So it's like when I read, since like some of us is working for somebody, some of us like we have our own company, so how to manage people. So if I read a book like this, I wanna okay, there are some problems, but I wanna, at the end you will say how to manage all these employees, right? You're not looking for an employee perspective, you're looking for a manager perspective.
Well, I think yes. I think the challenge is how do you tell a story on the resolution without being prescriptive and academic? You know what I mean? So I do a pretty good job, I think, on telling the story on character and conflict. And then when I do a poor job of telling the story in the resolution. And it comes off as
we can get more tactical later afterward, but I think it's not necessarily the resolution. I think in the academic model you're thinking of here, I think you're getting stuck more in the denouement side, which is unpacking the resolution. That's just what's coming to mind right now. And we'll get into more of it later. I'll keep moving on here in a second, but I think your main challenge with that right now is you're hitting this resolution piece and then you're trying to explain more, and I think that's probably you're doing too much, almost, it sounds like. I think you're overwearing something that's not a problem yet. I like you're thinking about it. It's important to be thinking about, but I think the question to be asking now, at least at this point for where you are, is, am I doing enough here and here for anyone to even get to this point and care, right? Because if we lose them here, right, and it sounds like we're making good progress there, which is good.
Yeah, I think I'm doing pretty good on there, and then I think I'm losing them in the resolution.
Yeah.
That's where, and that's.
Yeah. Let's talk more about that later, but I think you're onto something there. We'll get there. I think we have a few more minutes left, so I'll walk through a couple of specific things to help you do some of this stuff when you're ready to actually write a story. So these are some of the things that like I do. I think some of you mentioned like some how-to steps on how to get going with some of this stuff. So I'll breeze through a few of these and leave a couple extra minutes for questions. I think we're getting close. But when you're having those negative emotions and you're trying to get started, there are a couple of things that I do to kind of get going. So, that's trying to make the bar rounds again. It's exciting. There's actually a whiskey called Writer's Tears. So, yeah, Pomodoro, and then what was my third one? Where'd you go? Reward. Okay. So a little bit of this is some operant conditioning to help you think better about writing things. So I think a lot of folks get stuck, right, in getting that blank page started, right, taking that first step, really knowing where to begin with any of this. I think some pieces that I do when it comes to my writing process and how it applies to storytelling might help with some of that. So I'm a big fan of a regular ritual. So my writing times are what used to be when I was doing more writing. And God, please don't wake up at 5 a.m. like me, but it used to be 5 to 7. I did 12 to 1, 5 to 6:30. That's a 3. And then 9:30 to 11. And these were always my writing times when I first started getting writing and practicing with it. And I would put it, like, I was never really a big fan of time blocking, but I always put it in my phone to make sure I have it. So this was me before everybody else woke up, right? I can go get some things done, I like being uninterrupted. This is a lunch hour, so if you can get out and go somewhere. I'm a big fan of a third space, so go to the library, go to a coffee shop, go to a garage, whatever you got around you. Just get out of your usual space so you can work, right? This is for me right after work, and this lets me, instead of sitting in a commute, I was commuting like 45 minutes at the time. So instead of commuting, I just go and sit somewhere again, usually a library or something, and work until about 6:30. And then right before bed, I always had like the last minute, I gotta come up with something. So I've stuck closer to most of these. This 5 to 7 a.m. was a little tougher for me. But having a regular ritual of going and writing somewhere and doing that process at the same time starts training that function in the brain. And as you do that, it's much like an exercise. It's like doing push-ups, right? First 1,000 push-ups are really hard, right? Your muscles are sore after 10, you're tired of them. But the more you do that, the better you get at it. And the way you start breaking through that blank page fear, it's just full-on confrontation. You got to hit it, right? That said, it can still be very frustrating when you're in the process of it. And you look at these time blocks and go, God, Alex, I can't write for 2 hours straight. That's hard, right? So when you're first starting out, too, it can help with the Pomodoro technique. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that. You might have heard like the tomato timer or something. Yeah. So I follow a very non-traditional Pomodoro. I'm pretty lazy with it, but it works. That's why I brought this thing. It's a timer. It's a visual timer. It has saved my bacon more than once. So I will scroll it over to 25 minutes, right? And I put this thing right in front of me, and I do nothing else but the one writing task I have for 25 minutes, right? So maybe that's writing a chapter. Maybe it's writing a couple emails. Maybe that's writing the blog post I'm worried about, right? 25 minutes. You can do anything for 25 minutes, right? You can do this. Once this timer goes off, you give yourself 5 minutes of rest. It doesn't mean you have to get up necessarily and go wander anywhere. You could go do something else. You can send a text. You can do whatever. But give yourself that break from here. What I often find, if I do like 2 of these in a row, I don't even bother with the 5-minute rest anymore. I just kind of keep going. It's got me the momentum going. A lot of what you experience with that fear of writing is the inertia of getting started. It comes from this desire to want to have the perfect first word to get going, right? Or I got to have this great idea. I'm very much and this is veering from here, I'm very much a start in the middle kind of person. So like if you have your intro, middle, conclusion, I start writing here. So this is me doing my research ahead of time when I'm working on a topic. These are kind of like if you have your 3-paragraph structure back in school, these are your 3 paragraphs here, right? So 3 main points I'm trying to make. I usually write these first. It helps me write the rest of these. I can do this usually within 2 Pomodoro sections if I'm really cooking, depending on the topic itself and how much I want to talk about it. But give yourself something like a timer like this. This was $16 on Amazon. Go get one of those. They got fancier ones out there, but this works.
So you want to do an outline first, right?
Yes, outlines are pretty good. I'm a big fan of outlines. I know people are wishy-washy on it. So in terms of the ritual pieces, the outline kind of happens beforehand, and I have there's actually going to be another exercise when we're out of time to help you create an outline for yourself to get started on an idea you have right now. I'll walk through that here in a second, but I'm a big fan of outlining because you get stuck if you don't. It's really easy. Eventually, the more you do this, you can kind of whip up an outline in your head a little bit, but when you're first starting, give yourself the step ladder to work from, and I'll walk you through one here in a second. And then finally, when you're done with running your Pomodoro stuff and you've done your rituals, give yourself some kind of regular reward too. Go get the nice Starbucks drink, or go like take a walk, whatever you feel like gives you that dopamine rush, because you want to continue that feeling. This is the operant conditioning piece, like when you're training like a dog, right? And you're using the treats to try to get a command out of them, and eventually they just do the command on their own, right? Like you train them to sit, you give them the bacon. Eventually you take away the bacon, they still sit when you say sit. You're kind of doing this to yourself. Because when you don't have that reward system in place, you feel that fear and you reward that fear by feeling it more, right? The fear gets stronger. You want to take that fear away by giving yourself that pleasurable, that dopamine response to doing this work, right? And the more you work and train yourself that way through that operant conditioning, the faster you're going to be able to do any of this stuff, right? Start really kicking in. Eventually, you can drop the Pomodoro stuff. Eventually, you can probably drop outlines too. Don't do that now. But you can start dropping the guardrails, and you'll feel much more comfortable doing all this stuff. Make sense?
Yeah.
That clear? Okay. Last bit I'll give you here, and then we have closed down the place, haven't we, gang? We're good? Oh, that's thoughtful. Okay, cool. I'll actually, if you guys want me, I'll email you kind of a basic one-page outline sheet. Y'all can just have this. If you need more paper to work on one right now, I'm happy to give that to you. But essentially, that outline is going to be, and this is where some of you were mentioning this earlier of like knowing your audience, right? So my outlines usually look like I've got my target audience top at the front, right? So this is going to be who I want to talk to in a piece. So let's say I'm writing a 1,000-word article on getting over the fear of writing, which I may have done recently. I put that target audience of who I'm talking to up here, right? Because that's going to be different for everybody. If you're doing digital writing, keywords are really key up here. But even anyway, if you've got some, like this could be subject or topic, but essentially if there's something you want to make sure gets highlighted in a piece, put it up at the top as well. Give yourself a purpose or goal with a piece. So when this is published or shared, what should it be doing, right? What do you want it to accomplish? Do you want it to, is it in the business language, top of funnel? Is it trying to get interest in my business, right? Am I trying to convince someone to book a call with me? Am I trying to have them buy my book, right? Or get on a pre-order list? Have a goal. Every piece of content, everything you write should have some kind of goal, right, in the business setting. There's a lot in this outline, guys, but brand voice, right? And there's, again, a whole different session we can do on voice and tone, but give yourself a couple notes of what you want to sound like. So, and this is where when you start having other people start reading things, if you have a review team or other people you work with, being clear about what you're putting up here. So casual or conversational or formal, academic, right? Those are all ways in which we can talk about the voice and tone we bring to content, how it reads. So give yourself that at the beginning here so that people know what to expect, right? And then I'm a big fan of bucketing in all of the research I've done. So if you've done topic selection, you have an idea in mind of what you want to do, I like to put three external links to things. So the Princeton study I mentioned earlier, right? I had another one from Smith College. I'd put that here, right? And maybe I got something from Asana or something, right? More of the business side for project management. I'd put that here as well. But I'm a big fan of keeping that research here at the top, so that way you know where to put it, that you have something in here, or repository. After all that goes on the top. These outlines can get kind of big, but you need all this stuff to remind yourself of why you're doing it. There's a whole bunch of stuff on here. I'm not going to write all that because it's way too much writing for me. But again, intro, thesis. Write what's your thesis here, your statement, what do you want to do. Give me those three main points, at least, that support the thesis. Give me the call to action. So what do you want me as the reader specifically to do after I've done all this, right? And then I usually leave a conclusion in here, which is the summary of all of the above. And I'll send you guys, if you want, what this looks like. But just generally, this is like a good outline format for anything that you're writing. This could be a 1,000-word article. It could be a book, at least the start of a book, maybe a chapter in a book. But this is a good framework if you're having that fear of writing, to give yourself the step ladder to start working off of. Because now when you go and do your Pomodoro technique and you use that 25 minutes, you can go, I've got whatever, point 2A here I want to work on. Right? I want to talk about how the brain works with storytelling and how it connects with people. I can work 25 minutes on that, right? And you'll be surprised the more you do it, the more of this you finish in those time periods. But start with this. I think this is a good takeaway for all of you to begin with. Pretty basic outline, but again, it's giving yourself that information front and center to start working with, so you can tell that story and know who you're telling it to, and define those big 3 pieces for you, right? That character, conflict, and resolution. Learning about this, for you, Debbie, go read Save the Cat. It is the seminal book on screenwriting. So if you're going into screenwriting for like movies and all that and TV, it's literally like 101. You got to start with this book, but it handles some of the questions you had today around like, how do you build in that kind of resolution? How do you start working through those things? How do you build? Save the Cat. Yes, Save the Cat. Yeah, I know, I love it. It's great. But they've got things. This is where, if you've ever heard the term beat sheet, so like how they line up literally every minute in a movie matches like everything we talked about today. But he has the writer Blake has a very specific way of doing that. So Save the Cat. Mine's on Kindle, so I couldn't bring it for you, but Save the Cat's one to start with. Another one I use in business writing a lot is Ann Hanley's Everybody Writes. So I'll pass the one around. So she's got in there not only some of the stuff we talked about today, but some very specific ways to implement in different pieces. So like how to write an email, how to write a social post, how to write, like she gets very granular with it. She's got a great newsletter too, Total Anarchy with 2 N's. So I love a good pun. But that's a bi-weekly one that I track, and she does a lot of really good stuff. And then these are some other ones. These ones are fine.
Storyteller is really good one for like people that.
Yes, Storyteller. Yes. So that's a good one too. And I think a lot of this too, when I talk about like writing in business, again, when it comes like that business, that wall, they go, I got to read a nonfiction business book about how to write. And you're like, I'm a big fan of reading fiction. Of course, it's where I got my start, right? And getting into the writing world. So I'm a big fan of reading these fiction books to learn how to actually tell stories. This one is wild. This one's called The Last Unicorn by Peter S. Beagle. This guy wrote like one book, like this is it. If you ever have a day where you feel like you're really doing a good job with writing, read this and you'll be like, oh my God, I got a ways to go, man. I suck. Every sentence here is just gorgeous, and he tells an amazing story. So as we talked today about how to use words to express, right, and how to tell stories, read first of all, but like don't limit yourself to reading business books about writing. You're not going to find, I think, those key elements that are going to unlock that bigger emotional storytelling piece that we talked about today. But those are some things I'd recommend to get going. I'm around for some questions afterward. And thanks for coming out. Appreciate it all.